Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I'm going to be talking about my history at the charity shop. We go back to a Friday evening in June 2008. I had just finished school and we'd gone uptown for whatever reason, and we happened to be the last customers in the charity shop. I don't know why we were in there. I don't recall whether it was somewhere we went often. I think that, well, we all used to do a charity shop crawl. It came from it's something I'm going to have to mention a lot in these videos to if I'm talking about history. It's from my economic background of being from a rather poor working class family. Then charity shops were kind of the bread and butter for buying stuff when I was younger. And we were in this charity shop for whatever reason, and we'd gone to the till. As I say, they'd closed because it was past 4:30. And I saw this leaflet, a flyer even, on the desk that said volunteer today, and it listed stuff, and I just, for no reason at all, said I could do that. I think my dad had been pestering me about perhaps getting a job now that I was going to be 16, and I have always been someone to go against what my dad wants. I don't know why. Love the man. We get on very well, but I have never minded doing the opposite of what he wanted. Farmer's son. Now, you've got to remember that here I am a farmer's son who's an incredible disappointment because I don't do farming, I don't like mud, I don't do anything of that kind. He's perfectly happy for me to go and help him on occasion, but he is aware of that. The one major argument we ever had, he turned round and he said to me, "You won't make much money as a writer." And I said, "You don't make much money as a farmer, yet you still do it." He said, "Fair point," and that's the only discussion we have ever had on the topic of me being a writer. He doesn't understand why I want to write. I don't understand why he wants to farm. We're perfectly okay with that. But at the time, in a fit of rebellion, I chose to become a volunteer. I filled out the form on that Friday evening, and on the Saturday morning, I took it back into the shop and handed it over. By the Monday, I'd got a phone call asking me to go for an interview. Now, we don't interview volunteers nowadays. We are perfectly happy. But back then, you got trained as if you were going to be shop staff. So I went in for this interview and they said all these things about what I'd be doing, and they said about going to school, and I said, yeah, I'll be at school. I'll be entering into sixth form in September. So obviously they just wanted me to go on a Saturday afternoon. Now, let's talk about Saturday. I think it was the 12th of July in 2008. I don't know that for certain, but whatever the date was in July 2008, on this Saturday before my birthday, was the date that I started at the charity shop. Now, I should just say it's Age UK Cheshire East. I'll say this because it's already out there online for people to see. Firstly, we will go with the fact that I was very much knowledgeable of the fact that I wanted to become a writer, and anything to do with writing that was happening in my town I wanted to be a part of. So I'd seen that actually that morning of this Saturday they were having a Mills and Boon talk at the library. Do I know anything about Mills and Boon? Nothing, apart from the fact that my mother reads it. And it was all about how to write Mills and Boon. I was the youngest person there at the age of 15, and I think that perhaps the writer had wished to make it more smutty than she could, or maybe they did talk about sex. I don't know. I've always been part of the sex positive family, so the discussion's always been around me, so I can't tell whether I was prudish or not. I've never been prudish, for crying out loud, but I can't remember whether anything was exceptionally out there. Another part of this story. So I've just been to this Mills and Boon thing that lasted from about 10 in the morning until 12:30, and I am due to go and start my first ever shift volunteering at the charity shop at 1 o'clock. So my mum's determined that I'm going to have lunch. This is when I didn't eat salad and I wasn't the biggest fan of butter. But there's a cafe next door to the charity shop. My mum goes and buys me a turkey sandwich and asks whether I can eat it in the back before I start work. Here is something you should know about Charlie. If something goes wrong in the beginning for me, and I end up being completely embarrassed about something, I feel like that's the worst that could happen, and I'm not going to mind staying somewhere. So what happened? They made me a cup of tea. They're trying to get me properly settled in. You know, the overweight teenager they've never met before has just turned up in jogging bottoms, absolutely soaked through to the skin because it's been pouring it down with rain. They've taken his jumper off him and hung it so it'll dry for him by the time he's ready to leave at 4:30. And within the first 2 minutes, because I hate eating in front of people I don't know, and I've talked about this often, when I used to go to school, I wouldn't eat anything the entire day. I'd get home and probably binge food a lot because I just can't eat in front of people I don't know. It's just who I am. And so I was trying to eat this very quickly because I knew they wanted me to be on the till, and I was supposed to start at 1 and it was now past that. Choked on the turkey sandwich, tried to then knock back some tea that was too hot, spilled the tea down myself, and now I'm soaked anyway because of the rain. I'm now soaked in tea, and I've just choked on a turkey sandwich in front of 3 people I don't know. This is going to go well. We begin the day. Now, firstly, what I didn't know was that so many people who knew my dad actually worked at the charity shop. So firstly, we had one of the shop assistants who's still there now is the wife of a vicar that my dad knows and who has, you know, he did family funerals for our family for a while there, and my nan had a crush on him. The person who taught me how to use the till was the sister of the farmer my brother used to work for. And so immediately I start to feel at ease and everything's going well. I pick up the till, it's just basically a posh calculator. We enter into the first day. Nobody told me they had a pound rail. A lady came in pushing her trolley and she filled this trolley. She piled it high and then she brought it all over to the till. And I'm putting it all in, not knowing what, you know, not knowing anything. And I tell her the price. She goes, how much? I'm like, oh, Lord, there's a problem. And she goes, there's a pound. That's all off the pound rail. I'm like, oh, well, that's great. That is great. That's fantastic. First mistake, first day, person has to come out and they have to minus everything off the till, refund it off the till. I have to input it all as a pound again. It'd be fine if this was the only time that ever happened. Now, you've got to remember at the time I was 15 years old and I wasn't very good at conversation. I wasn't very good at talking to customers. I would just bag things up and hand it over and there'd be no conversation whilst that was happening. I was terrible. I'm still not the best at it now. I'm very much just a, would you like a bag? Thank you, see you again type person. A few weeks down the line, it happened again. And this time, she turned around and said, I don't know where you employ people like that at the charity shop. Firstly, I'm a teenager, so wind your neck in. That was one of the things that happened. But I started at the charity shop then, and I had a few more embarrassing incidents, but I met Abercrombie. She used to do the steamer whilst I would be on the shop floor doing the till, and there'd be occasions where I'd get to go into the back and talk to her, and found somebody who read a lot of books, incredibly knowledgeable about the world, and has become quite a friend of mine. Then that Christmas, they invited me to a Christmas party. Now, back then there was only the one shop, and so we all went for this Christmas buffet with head office. I got sat next to the CEO, didn't realise that she was the CEO. Everyone around the table, because she ate a turkey leg with her knife and fork, was trying to eat a turkey leg with a knife and fork. I was trying to do this and couldn't do it. Now, firstly, didn't know it was the CEO. Secondly, she used to be very well-spoken, Madeline. Every time she saw you, used to ask how you were, and we hadn't met before, so she's going through that whole thing of introducing herself, and I'm just like, I don't know who you are. I thought she was just a volunteer. And she says to me, what type, she finds out I'm a writer, what type of stories do you write? I said, fantasy. She thought I said, fancy, and says, what? Like calligraphy? Fantastic line. I found out she's the CEO a few weeks later. Don't really know what that means. Don't care. 16. Don't think I'm going to be there for the next 12 years. So she says that, but because of that, and because that's happened, immediately I can never not see her as the person who thought I wrote and just drew calligraphy and was going around trying to make a career as a calligrapher. I mean, I probably should have tried it. It'd be making more money than as a writer. But then I find out that people were scared of her. So over the years, we do go through some changes. When I first started, I should say, they did this thing where they said, because you're a volunteer, you can borrow any book you want and you don't have to bring it back until you finish reading it. I accumulated so many books because Abercrombie and me would go and we would stand in front of the bookshelves and she'd pull stuff out and she'd say, you need to read this. So I'd bring it home with me. And my bedroom would get stacks and stacks of books. I think at one point I had 360 unread books, and every single one of them had come from the charity shop, and I'd had them for years. So I was like taking 2 books every week. Not good. Some of them I was paying for, I should say that. Anyway, when I noticed that, I started returning them fast. I kept volunteering throughout my time in 6th form, and it really helped me actually, because you had to do a period of enrichment to be able to get your EMA back then, which when the government would give you £30 a week. And I didn't want to do it because it meant I could have a free Wednesday afternoon. So originally I was helping out with the English class. And then I just went to them and I said, look, I'm volunteering for 4 hours every week at this charity shop. Can that count? And it counted. And so it worked out really, really well for me, that did. And every year I would say to them, I don't know whether I'm going to be able to continue doing this because I don't know what it's going to be like. And admittedly, in my final year of uni, which was 2012 to 2013, I had started at the writers group by then. But I think my uni days were only, I think they were Monday, Tuesday and Friday. By Friday, we had to have work for every single class in. And so you'd get about 10,000 words for each class. So 30,000 words nearly, I think that was it. You'd have to critique them and bring them to the next class. And I was a harsh critiquer, so I was spending my days just critiquing other people's work. I did give up the charity shop for a few months then, just so that I could get work done. And then 2013 got an actual paid position with a shop we were opening in Congleton. Unfortunately, that didn't do so well, but it did have tons of drama, and Lord, the things that happened whilst I was at that shop could fill several novels, but they won't. I will never, ever write about what happened there. And then they were going to make me redundant, which you might remember from when I first started this booktube channel, but I got moved to another shop in Poynton as a last minute reprieve, and I've been there now for 5 years. In all my years, I have worked at every single premises that we have had, apart from when we moved one of our showrooms. I didn't work at the second showroom we ever had, and I won't be working at where it's moved to now. But yeah, I've worked at every shop. I have worked with most of the people who work for us now, most of the employees. I get on with most people. It's a strange job because all you're doing is you're going through the stuff that people are throwing away. To get a bit, we're out of PG here. One of our shops actually had a strap-on vibrating purple dildo donated years ago to one of our old premises. So, and it was such a strange donation to receive that it was actually kept as an example of weird stuff we've had donated. I have talked about getting a bowl of washing up with the water still in it donated. There have been some really bad donations in my time there. Sometimes they're upsetting. When I actually became an employee, I realised it was when I discovered about how if people are in retirement homes, they are given such a short amount of time. If they die, their relatives are given such a short amount of time to empty the place that they just bag it all up and bring it to you. And it became very easy for me to recognise when somebody had died and their family were just throwing their stuff out. And one man was very annoyed. This was when I worked at Congleton, because he'd had to come all the way up from London to empty his Auntie Beryl's flat. I can remember a name, it was stuck in my head that much. And I got sad because I was going through all this stuff and a lot of it was stained, and I was finding that sometimes when there's a carer going in or they're in one of these retirement places, they just aren't having the time to be able to wash everything as it needs changing. So I was getting stuff that I was having to throw out, and a lot of this person's Auntie Beryl stuff just got thrown away. When I say thrown away, I mean ragged, and we got the money back for that. And he's just gone back to London. And he's not thinking about the fact that his Auntie Beryl's dead and gone. He's just thinking about, well, it's a weight off my mind now. I've got rid of her stuff. And I do get a few people who are like that. You also always get the people who think that their stuff is worth more than it is. I remember someone getting very upset once because they'd held on to McDonald's toys from the 1980s into the 2000s because they believed they'd be worth something one day. And when I looked them up, I found out that this person had been holding on to stuff that you could sell on eBay incredibly cheaply, and they were not happy about that. I can't say for sure whether I've ever had anything incredibly big or weird donated to me, because actually stuff kind of blends in a lot of the time. Where I work now, we do get more designer items, and I think there's been a definite shift since I started working at the charity shop. When I started, I think that people were looking for cheap and cheerful, but now with people doing a lot of buying and selling online, there's people still looking for bargains, but they only want really quality items. And so you'll find different areas where you can sell different items. So where I work, we're probably going to be selling more designer stuff. It has to be in really tip-top condition before we can sell it, whereas in another area where people and customers are perhaps more forgiving, will purchase stuff that isn't damaged in any way, but it's perhaps a lesser quality, or it's a different, it's one of those shops that kind of feed into fast fashion. I think most people don't think of this as a job for a 28-year-old man. And a lot of the time people have thought that it should be a job for someone who's retired and they're looking for something easy to do. When I first got the job, I didn't have a choice. I had left uni, I had no money to my name, and I had to pay rent. And I just happened to be incredibly lucky that the charity shop was opening another shop, and that they gave me the job, and that they brought my contract forward so that I could spend a month working in a different shop and earning. But it was about 3 months work before I did eventually get paid. So can you imagine just working 3 months on the never, not sure whether you were ever going to get paid, but you kind of dedicated yourself to the charity? I've always got on with the people that worked here. There have been times when I've had arguments, as documented here last year. I did have a big argument with someone, but we still got on with each other. And I think I've always said that I like to argue with someone because I think that it helps you get the measure of them as a person. And I think that arguing is part of being an adult, and you can't agree about everything. And if you aren't arguing with people and getting over it, and if you're holding on to stuff, it's not healthy. So I'm not saying that I haven't argued with everyone I've ever worked with, because I have argued with every single person that I've ever worked with. I talk about being grumpy all the time on here. Some people don't know how I still get on with people afterwards, but that's just who I am. An argument is not like the end of a relationship. With these arguments, and with sometimes me having moments where I think that the job is a bit easy and I know it, I always thought that I would be doing more with my writing, and only having this part-time job allows me the time to spend writing. And I still had a lot of familial obligations when I first got the job, where both of my grandmothers were still alive and I was still helping out a lot there. Me and my mum, she's not in the best health herself, so sometimes needs someone there with her. It's a job that gives me frustrations, I won't deny that, but at the same time, I feel like frustrations just goes to show how something's a bit important to you, and also it still gives me the time to get my writing done, and it gives me time to do YouTube, and it gives me a time to have a life. Yes, it might be nice to be able to earn more, but my thought process was always that I would be making more from writing than I currently am. I have been at the charity shop for 12 years now. I have sorted donations. I have come across things that you would never want to put your hands into. I describe myself as a glorified bin man on days. There have been times when I have been in a car park soaked through to my skin sorting donations, and I've wondered about the reasoning behind it all. We're raising money to support people over the age of 50 in my local area, it seems like a worthwhile job at the end of the day. I should have done a Q&A really, shouldn't I? A Q&A about the charity shop. There we go, let's talk about the charity shop in 2020 now. It's been difficult this year. We've had a few difficult years in terms of money and that sort of thing. We've lost funding. That's not good. You know, forgetting about the people who work there, let's think about the people who we support. We put a lot of the money that we get for older people into supporting older people in the community, and if we don't have the funding, sometimes it can be difficult to do that. And this year has been more difficult because we have spent 4 months out of 12 in a lockdown, and on average I know how much that means that the charity has lost and how much that means isn't feeding back into the community. I think that with the pandemic and the new way of doing things, having to store donations and only being able to store a certain amount, I think that people have this idea that we are just glorified bin men. And they've been looking at stuff in their house for months, and I know we've all done it, and we've looked at this stuff and we've thought, well, I don't want this anymore, it can go to charity, because we do believe the adage, one man's trash is another man's treasure. But sometimes I ask that people show a bit more empathy, because I have dealt with a lot more angry, upset people this year than I have done in any previous year. I have had many moments when I've just had to walk away from customers who have been getting outraged and shouting very nasty things just this year, because people see charity and they want to take advantage sometimes. And in terms of the pandemic this year, what I've kept saying is that my obligation is to my volunteers, and at the end of the day, I've got to make sure that they're safe. And if we're unable to take donations, it's not our fault. It's just that we can't do it. And it's not because we don't want the donations. It's not because we don't like you as a person. We oftentimes just do not have the room. We are limited on staff numbers as well and volunteer numbers. We can't get through everything the way people are hoping that we can get through everything and manage in the conditions we are currently in. And I wish that people had had more thought about that before they started getting angry and just started treating us like we were worth less than them because of the job we were doing. Whilst we are sorting second-hand clothes and books and bric-a-brac, we are doing a lot more than that. We are speaking to people, we are speaking to customers who come in who might be feeling a bit fragile and a bit fraught over what's going on in their lives. Oftentimes when you're getting second-hand stuff, as previously said, it can be from a bereavement, and not everyone is like Auntie Beryl's nephew. A lot of them are grieving, and sometimes you aren't going to be able to turn away someone who is grieving. You need to chat to them and you need to make sure they're leaving your shop maybe not feeling better, but certainly not feeling worse. We are doing a lot to keep everyone happy and try and keep ourselves safe at the same time. I think that a lot of people are worried and anxious about the state of the world at the moment. I understand that, but as has been my thing throughout life, be kind to people. Always reach for kindness before you reach for aggravation. Yes, it's very easy to be aggravated. Yes, it's very easy to be angry and make monosyllabic remarks, but just stop. Allow yourself to think about what's being said. One thing that I even do with the mean customers is I will try and kill them with kindness. If you're kind to someone who's been nasty to you, oftentimes they're going to feel about that big. And it's not something I like to do to people. I don't want anyone to feel less than. I also refuse to allow anyone to be belittled when I know how hard they're working. As we go back and the shops are reopening, maybe show kindness to people more and don't get frustrated when they don't have what you want. Sit back and think about the important things for a moment, because I'd love nothing more than to be able to help you to the best of my ability. But sometimes things are going to get in the way, and I think we've all got to recognise that there are a lot of regulations now that weren't there at the start of the year, and it's going to take a lot of work on our part, but I'm sure we'll get back to a manageable sort of life very soon. You know, I've been on this planet 28 years, and there are people here who've been a lot longer, and this is just a momentary distraction in the grand scheme of things. So I'm going to leave things there. If you do have any questions about my work at the charity shop, funny or otherwise, or just inquisitive, then please do feel free to ask them in the comments. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.